Okay. Hello, everybody. This is the Feel Better, Do Better Together show. Show feels like a big word for it, but we're using it. I'm Deb Shine Valentine here with co-creator Marquita Davis, and we're going to riff a little bit on a voice message that Marquita sent me after the Supreme Court ruled against affirmative action. And it was the most delightful message. I was feeling rather heavy that morning, and I got this message with Marquita just cracking up, like totally cracking up, and saying that all she could think about, all she could think every time she walked past a white woman was, Molly, you in trouble. And she was just
Yes,
cracking up.
yes.
And it changed my whole perspective on what was happening, and the possibilities for how to react to it. So, Marquita, do you want to take it from here and share your side of that experience?
Yeah, and just to kind of clue anybody in, if they didn't get the reference, the movie Ghost, Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Whoopi Goldberg, and her beautiful humorous self. When it was time for his ghost to tell Demi, that somebody was after her, Whoopi Goldberg was like, Molly, you in trouble, girl. So I heard the affirmative action, and understanding that white women have been the biggest beneficiary of it, and then even connecting that to the overturning of Roe v. Wade last year, I was like, oh, they trying to do white women in, like, oh, they don't like them, they out of line. I said, this is because by and large, white supremacy don't care what black people do. They don't care about us. As long as they understand, and this is going to sound bad, but they trust the systems and institutions enough to function the way they should, so that we're only going to get but so far, except we receive someone else. We create our own thing, or someone decides not to be a gatekeeper for the things on the other side of privilege. Educated white women who have a sense of autonomy and can think critically and are well resourced from within themselves can often see the logic and wisdom of not gatekeeping things on the other side of their privilege. And I can only see the long game being to have a bunch of uneducated white girls with babies who are unresourced and can only afford to let the systems go on. Like, they won't even have access to the things that privilege hold. Like, they'll be locked out of it, but won't even know because they won't be educated. Like, that was heartbreaking when I realized it. And like, my laugh was one of them. It's funny, but it ain't funny. It was like, yo, y'all really in trouble when you keep voting with this nonsense. How you not peak the game at this point? I don't get it. It's beyond me. It's beyond me. But yeah. So
Yeah.
to all, you in trouble, girl. You ain't got to take it from me. You got your own sister folks you can talk to that are ooh, man, it is a perilous road. Or they're trying to predict that, but it doesn't have to be, because that's part of the reason that I like the idea of our program and what we do being also class diverse. And it's not intended at all to like paint people of color as mostly poor. The truth is there are more poor people in this country than there are Black people. But even in terms of the for that sake, we have a shared interest. Like, for that matter, we have a shared interest with them. So it makes sense to care about people who don't look like me per se, and understand how our journeys are still at least connected economically, you know, or at least the destinies, I should say, can be connected economically. I think that when we don't want to look outside of that bubble, though, and just keep it as a us them, then we lose sight of, you know, you can't insulate yourself from those systems and institutions, and you can take that from a person who is subjected to them most of the time, which would be a person of color. And I think that shared energy of being able to collectively problem solve with those different perspectives and voices, and I think it's a great vehicle to be able to, I think I mentioned it maybe in another talk, about being able to humanize us to each other again. Like, we're not just the problems and opinions that we hear from pundits about particular groups. Like, there are individuals attached to these stories, and the circumstances are often more complicated than anybody's headlines. And you don't need to know the details. We can just review our own lives. Like, if we all consider our own worst moment or worst circumstance, nobody lined up their math to work out that way. You know what I mean? Like, we all meant to do better, or would have if we could have. So with that part, I think we have to be a little more gracious when it comes to extending that kindness and that ear for folks, because people is in trouble and don't even know. Like, that's crazy to me. That is crazy.
Yeah, well, and that, I mean, to your point, the people are in trouble and don't even know. Until you said that to me, and I know the stats, like, I know that white women have benefited more from affirmative action than any other group. But I was just grieving. I was grieving and concerned about the losses for people of color, because I was blind to even my own, like, shared, like, situation. My privilege has even allowed me to not even see how I'm part of it, until you were like, "Oh, white women are in trouble." Like, and I don't mean that to say, and I don't think you're saying, "Oh, white women are in more trouble than people of color." I don't think either of us are saying that. But that,
no, I'm saying white women get with the program. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up.
Like, hello, this is
together.
Yeah, and that it's not about
you in trouble, and wake up and listen.
Yeah, say that again, because I talked over you.
I'm sorry. I was saying, Molly, wake up. They after all of us. Come on, it ain't no them and us. They after all of us. The ones with the money and the penises. We got, come on. We can't. We can't.
Yes, and that's how the system works, right? Like, that's how the system works. It never supported it. The system never really supported poor white men, for anybody, but it got poor white men and poor white women, but especially initially, it got poor white men to believe that they could have some of the power as long as they weren't Black, as long as Black people were below them. And if Black people and poor white people, or working class white people and Black people, had gotten together 150 years ago, or now, you know, that they could have brought a lot of change. But the having the systems in power work by dividing us from each other, so that we're all trying to just hold on to our little piece, consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's hilarious? I really laugh at the wrong things, but it just it dawned on me, like, if you think about it back then, when it was like, well, you don't need land and money. You just have to not be an N-word, like, and you're gonna be okay. And the thing is, they didn't improve the conditions for those folks. They just began to treat Black people abjectly worse. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it was a tool to, like, you don't want to associate with them, or you will also get that punishment. So there's some part of me that understands subconsciously we all have visceral scripts connected to when these divisions occurred, which would be another reason that I try to be gracious. It's just I forgot where I was going with that, but it's that in itself, to me, seems like it would be a clue that we can all work for something better. Like, nobody except for the ruling class had it good. Nobody had it good. It was the ruling class and people who had it worse, which is still how it is. Like, the power of our individual votes have kind of been co-opted by corporations who now have people status. Like, we never going to be Amazon money. We're never going to do that. So it's going to take, like, collective awareness and agreement around some things that have to transcend whatever the boundary of your intersection is. Like, where, like, yes, we all have these identities, and they are all affected in different ways. At some point, if we're going to be able to respond with love and intention, we have to not fully subscribe to those identities, because in doing so, we don't just take the power, we take the bullshit that's been put on them too. So I'm a Black woman all day, every day, until people start saying Black people, Black women are things that I don't identify myself with. So at that point, I don't know who you're talking to. You ain't talking to me, you know what I mean? And I think that we have to be willing to do that. I feel like only pride makes us stand on those mantles and take the lashes that come with that. But we can really, at that point, choose to understand the person saying those things or holding those beliefs are really saying what they think of themselves, because they don't know me. You know what I mean? Like, they don't know me to believe those things. So they're only saying what's in their own head.
Can you give an example so that people who are listening know what you mean about, like, what kind of thing might come towards you and how you would respond?
I actually have a perfect one. When I used to work at the homeless shelter, I used to work at this homeless shelter for people with opiate addictions, which, depending on however they were. When they were good, they were very good, but when they bad, they were horrid in their behavior. And when I first started working there, I had the best of intentions and all Marquita's gushy heart love, until I caught somebody in some bad withdrawal. And then suddenly Miss Marquita was, "You fat bitch, you fat Black bitch." And it was like, ho, 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 ho. And suddenly fat Black bitch was every mammy that I had ever heard of. It wasn't Lizzo that came to mind. Not that she was very popular back then, but it wasn't an image that caused me to feel empowered, because I knew in that moment it wasn't a term of respect. Like I can't. There's something to be said, I guess, for vibration, because tone matters, and people can say the same words without the same meaning and have totally different impacts. So in that moment, and it was a white person that said it, so it was extra charged. And of course, when they were well, they tried to say they didn't mean it that way. But in all the ways that you could have described me, you know what I mean? It was terms connected. You used them in ways that were meant to hurt. You know what I mean? Like, you meant for me to be hurt by not just being a fluffy girl, but being Black in that moment. Because you're a white person. Like, you meant for that to feel nasty. No, it wasn't the N-word, but it might as well have been. You know, in my snippy way, I feel like I'd have rather you said the N-word, because then you standing 10 toes down. You ain't hiding. You being out with it. Because there's no nice version of it. You know what I mean? There's no nice version. There's no softness. It don't feel less hurtful. But that's what I mean. Like, so in order, though, for me to have a conversation with him, I can't be caught up in the emotion about how I felt about what he said. I can tell you the impact of your words, and I can tell you my thoughts now, you know what I mean, or my understanding of where we are with that. And at that point, he can go reflect. You can argue with you about what you meant when you said that, because you're not going to change my mind. You can decide for yourself what you meant. And if you did not mean what you said, you will come back and apologize, because you want to know you was wrong in what you said, and you goddamn lied in my face when you said you ain't mean it. You know what I mean? Like, and that, though, is not an easy thing to do. I can't say it was something I would have really been willing to do if it didn't mean, like, I worked there. That person lived there. There was no not interacting with them unless I was willing to leave that job, which means need to figure out how to manage this, you know, how, because they ain't going nowhere and I ain't going nowhere. But yeah, that would have been one of them moments. And I think that is the part where, because people can be reactive and say things and like that highlights the ignorance to me. And also, even more, shows the importance of having like educated moms, because like mothers of every culture is a child's first teacher, you know. And if mom feels like people of color are the source of every ailment and woe and injustice that they discuss, you know, or reason they haven't been able to achieve, and everything around them supports that belief, then you can't blame kids that grow up that way and then also don't have access to education and opportunities to learn different than what they've been taught. And I say the same thing when people try to grind up Black kids and kids of color in neighborhoods that are under-resourced, with recreational centers and libraries and things like that, to let children be able to use that energy and imagination in a positive way. So it starts with, for me, I think I've never been one to really consider a thing about female empowerment, because I never felt limited, I guess, in the way that original feminism did. Like, I've always working wasn't a new idea. But I can see where it's important for women to know they have a voice and that there's power that comes with it, and it doesn't have to just use the words other people tell them to say. Like, you can have their own words, you know, sis, Molly. we can have our own words.
Yeah. A couple things come to mind for me, and really resonate in what you were saying, and a question. So I'm closing my eyes because I had to try to remember.
Yeah, I was rambling here. My bad.
Oh, no. My question, if you can hold on to it so I don't forget it. My question for you is, like you were saying, in that situation with that person, you might not have continued to interact with them, or like found a way to move forward and still be in relationship with them, except that you had to if you wanted to keep your job. And so my question is around why do you interact with white folks on purpose? like me, for instance, like, why create a program with me? Why work with other white folks? Like, you even, you've worked with me in some other organizations that are predominantly white, where white folks have, done harmful things, said ignorant things. And you offered at one point to do like a Ask the Black Girl session for white people. That they would have a space to ask the embarrassing and often offensive questions, but like, you were willing to be a resource in that way. So the question, I was going to make a comment, but let's just go with the question. The question is, like, why do you bother, and how do you care for yourself as you continue to choose to actually work with us and we're always learning, like, and we're always messing up. So why do you bother, and how do you take care of yourself as you do that?
So that's a layered answer. It's a layered answer because that's just how I usually view things. Why I work with you is because you're not just a white lady, like, you're my friend. At this point, I can't imagine, I don't imagine any hard fouls. You got a Black husband and Black sons, you know what I mean? So at this point in our relationship, any faux pas is, Deb, you lovable goof. Girl, did you hear yourself? You know what I mean? That's where we are now. But I understand that everybody ain't you. And I believe that one of the things that keeps us as humans from being able to move in love is because we often don't experience it very deeply. And a thing that hinders that is a feeling of fear. Like, you're not safe. You're not safe, and you're feeling threatened all the time. And every white person that feels safer in their being, I personally believe, saves the life of 10 Black people, at least. At least 10 people of color. So that's one reason. I think also because a lot of those beliefs are tied to emotions and superficial facts. Being educated about some things can offer people an out from something that they've held on to a long time. Also, that venomous stuff that they might feel, is easy to say it to a screen, you know what I mean? But can you say it to a person that's talking to you in this moment? Can you really still say it with your chest and feel it that way? Because I want to know what that's about, because to me, you can only genuinely hate somebody if you hate yourself. Every time I look at people, I only see reflections of myself. If it's something that makes me upset, then that's something for me to go home and think about, where I've noticed that upsetness in myself and how I can heal it. I'm not saying that I get it right all the time in real time, but those would be the things that I hold on to during my meditation. If I have a pleasant interaction with somebody, what did I like about that experience? How can I carry that back with me and hold that as something to hold me? And joy is a much more sustainable resource to create. A little bit goes a long way. So I care for myself by just doing things that cause me joy. If it's talking with a friend, if it's listening to music, if it's actively dating, which is my new favorite pastime, whatever it is that helps me feel full and happy, that's what I do. And I release myself from people's judgment of it. You know why? Because nobody pays the tax to be Marquita but goddamn Marquita. So as long as I'm paying the bill, then I will decide, and I can choose to walk in those rooms with confidence because I know I can walk right back out if it gets too much. And that in itself, even if somebody there feels they hold some type of oppression over me, the fact that I can leave and they can do nothing about it instantly disproves that belief for them. So that is my very layered answer. I hope I got it all.
Thank you. And I'm realizing this is sounding like I'm interviewing you, and maybe we'll move into a more conversational back and forth as we grow in this, in this context. I think that would be fun, and we're good at that.
I'll come up with some questions for you next time.
Awesome. The other thing I wanted to respond to in what you said was, like, as a white woman who grew up really conservative, definitely taught to vote against my own self-interest in terms of abortion, in terms of women in leadership. I was taught that women should not be pastors, women should not be leaders. Basically, women should stay home with children. Really took that in. I came to feminism or womanism, to use a more encompassing term, through the door of working for racial justice. Like, that's what I was able to see first, that the system was really messed up in terms of how people of color were treated. It was much, much later for me that I could start to see that it was messed up in how I was being treated as a woman. That's not every white woman's experience, but that was mine. And the thing that I think is also present that you've touched on a little bit, but is the internalized, right? Like, there's the internalized racism and the internalized sexism and the internalized classism that I have been amazed in myself, having done many, 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 many years of deep work, therapy, coaching, all kinds of coaching programs, somatic work, working with my body, intellectual work around sexism and racism. But for me, it's especially sexism that, I've experienced in my body. And then by proximity, learning more about, the experiences of my husband and you and other people of color in my life, like learning more about the experience of racism, and internalized and externalized. But for me, the sexism part, I am just amazed at how deep my subconscious internal commitment to maintaining the status quo is. Like, and that it is not in my head. It is in, like, my nervous system, my reactions, my and that's why we also do a lot of somatic work. We do work with the body. We talk to parts of our body that are contracted, or that are vibrating, or that are doing whatever they're doing, and we listen to them. And it reminds me also, when you were talking of Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, and talking about how we have this trauma in our bodies. All of us have it. even white dudes have it, because white dudes are not actually the problem. Toxic masculinity and patriarchy and capitalism almost together, and misogyny, like that's the problem. And I'm
Yes.
not about to say that, you know, rich white dudes have it as bad as everybody else, but there are boxes that they have to live in that are damaging in order for them to hold on to that power. Um,
Hmm.
so I think part of what I see as the work that you and I are stumbling through together
Hmm.
is, what's it like for us to center Black people and women as a start? Like, there's a lot of other people we could center who are also targets of oppression, and we all have these intersectional identities, people who are differently
Hmm.
abled, neurodivergent, um, all of those different identities that are targeted by these systems of power. We want to practice in a space where we're centering Black people and women, so that, and where we are intentionally seeking to be cross class, which that is actually the thing that I think I find in the fewest number of spaces. Like, I might be in spaces where there's cross racial, but we're still similar class. Um,
Yeah.
Cross class seems like it's so rare. And I feel like I'm really rambling now, but where I'm trying to go with this is, we want to do this really hard thing that is both internal and external, hard and amazing. And it's about love, right? Like, it's
Hmm.
like you said, but not like easy, not
No,
like,
not fluffy love. It's the
not
real joy.
fluffy. Yeah. Like, and so it's like loving, there is that internal external aspect that we're constantly doing, like learning to love the parts of myself that I want to hate is not
Hmm.
the full solution, but it is part of the solution. And I actually do believe that there are times when we are doing the work of generations before us and generations coming after us, when we are just doing the work with our
Yeah.
own stuff. I know for me, being an under earner, um, has been a lifelong thing, and I was taught to be that. And who benefits from me under earning? To get back to, so we can start to wrap up, to get back to Molly, you're in trouble. Who benefits from me under earning?
The
Like,
patriarchy,
yeah,
capitalism.
it's not you that benefits from me under earning, right?
Mhm.
It's not generally other women that benefit from me under earning. It's the power structures that then, I don't have the power of money to help me make a difference. I don't
Right.
have the the resources to care for myself that help me feel stronger and more empowered. Like, who benefits? So that's actually a question that I think is a really great place possibly for us to begin to wrap up with, is when you look at what you're experiencing, like you're feeling afraid to do X, or you don't want to, like, for white women, a lot of what we've internalized is, do not touch the status quo. And I actually see that also in my husband, who is a Black man who went to private school and has been like the good Black person,
Hmm.
always the good Black person. If and so to hold on to that, you internalize, don't mess with the status quo. Who benefits if I feel disempowered and I'm too scared to make anybody mad at me? Right? Like, who benefits? It's not even, I'll just stop talking there. Who benefits?
No,
That's the
I
question. Who
understand
benefits?
completely. I understand everything you're saying, and I think it's both and I think it's two things. I think where it comes to that internalized part, it's probably for myself, it's been where I over identify with the negative things. I don't know how old I was, but I wasn't even in school yet when my father said to me, you was already born with 2 strikes against you. You was Black and you was a woman. So don't make no mistakes because you can't afford 3, you know? And that did a lot of things. To some people who receive that messaging, it can cause a do good, try harder, never die attitude. For me, it more made it, you better hit it on the first try because you may not get a second try. And that's fine, but I didn't really get to build up the resilience with what happens if you don't make it the first try. And so when we live like that and we don't build up that resilience, it's very easy to misinterpret failure when it comes to something we most want to do, and identify it now as a thing that ought not be done just because it contains a level of difficulty we've not met before.
Yeah, because perfectionism serves these systems that we're in.
Right.
Like it is a characteristic of white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal society.
Yes, and this is where I am not in any way saying there is no color, but I think that each of us, wherever we fall into those groups, have to be willing to not be what that is. If we're going to allow ourselves to release, if we're going to be able to release those thoughts, we gotta release ourselves we gotta free ourselves from what they're connected to. So if it's a bad idea about that identity, then don't be that. Like, until you can be that with peace, don't be that. Call yourself something else or get a new belief. Something has to change, because it's like trying to do both is like saying, how can I live with this uncomfortable thing in my shoe? And my example for practicing that would be, I received that messaging about what women aren't and shouldn't from church, the Black church. And what I had to either agree that they were right or continue to think myself as somebody that couldn't perform well enough to believe myself loved by God. Those was the choices for me. Something wasn't aligned, and it was a big risk to say, I'm not going to church no more. I'm not going to be a Christian anymore. I'm not going to do that, so that I can figure out whatever it is I wanted to do, what was it, and how I can do it my true way. Like, we have to be willing to not be something, at least for a little while, so that we can fully become that thing that's before us. I think sometimes experiencing that gap between what we are and what we're trying to be, like that little, I don't know where I am space, can send a lot of us running back to what's familiar, or thinking because we haven't landed that we're not going to land at all. So we either stay stuck or go back to what's familiar. So in addition to all the systemic pressures, like, and who has time to think of all of that, right? Like me and my air sign self, that's my hobby shit right there. Like, oh, what shall I solve today? You know, like, that's my, but who has time when they're working so many jobs, when they're trying to have joy? Nobody has time to think about things like that, you know? And that would be the great part, the other great part about the thing we offer, because that at least is an hour of space where, you know what, you can absorb and have some things to think about later, or you could come and just be, because everything outside of that container that we create is what we want to be able to empower more people to deal with more effectively. So yeah, I know I was windy and babbly, but I hope it all connected somehow.
Well, we meandered through a whole lot of things today, so hopefully it was helpful to those of you who are listening in some way, shape, or form, that you at least feel seen at some point, that you know that you're not alone as you're trying to meander through the mess of all of this. It's complicated, it's layered, it's big and vast, and it's also tiny and right inside of us. And yeah, and we do it together, and we mess up together, and we help each other up. And yeah, so I'm grateful to be in the mess with you, Marquita.
Me too. Thank you. And even just with disrupting the status quo, that's super scary. You know, if it's don't push the red button, maybe just play around with the idea of touching the red button. Maybe just find out where the red button is. You know, just
Yeah.
make it less spooky to yourself. And you know, why? Oh, well, why can't I? And then get curious. Why can't I touch it? Everybody else seems to touch it. What's so special? You know what I mean? Like, what do
Yeah.
I need to be able to touch it? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and
curious.
maybe that's a good place for us to think about. I'm doing a practice sort of without even consciously. This is called havening. I learned it from Kate Northrup and others. But you can
Mm,
almost pretend like you're just putting lotion on your hands and forearms. It's a way to calm your nervous system, because you can shout I am safe messages at your nervous system all you want. It's not listening.
mm.
It needs
Oh,
to
for sure.
feel safe. So maybe next time, and I think titration, what you were just talking about, like just trying a little bit, trying a little something else, not feeling like you have to go all the way into the thing that scares you the most right away
Yeah.
in terms of disruption. Um, if that's something that you struggle with. And then, yeah, like having people to hold you before, to hold you after, to hold you during, energetically and otherwise, and celebrating those small wins when you do
Mm-hmm.
something that's brave, that maybe nobody else would even know it was brave for you, but because your nervous system thought it was terrifying, it was brave for you. So I'm
Yes.
thinking maybe next time that might be a way for us to go to share a few more of those, but we'll see. We'll see where the inspiration takes us. But for now, Molly, we in trouble.
Molly, you in trouble, girl. Tell your friends. Make TikToks
Yeah,
about that. Molly, y'all in trouble.
yeah.
Y'all
And
connect the
we
dots
have
between Roe v.
power
Wade
to make
and
a
the ending
difference.
of affirmative action because
Yes.
it's trouble.
Yeah. And that reminds me of one other thing. The other one of my good African American friends who posted on that day was Dr. Amanda Kemp, Aminata Soul, Plant Walker Firewoman.
Mm,
And she posted basically like, I'm okay. I'm strong. Like, I don't need you all to save me. I'm strong. And I loved experiencing from the two of you, both strong Black women, the power of laughter and like, you know, really, this is not going to affect me as much as it's going to affect you, or just laughing at the ridiculousness of it all, and the power that there is in that, that you took back from people who were saying we're taking away power from you, and the power that she took by saying, like, excuse me, I don't know who you think I am. I'm not a damsel in distress here. Like,
for sure.
I may not be happy about this ruling, but I'm strong. I'm fine. We've been strong and fine for a long time as Black women,
I believe the
is what
great
I was
prophet
hearing from both of you.
thank you. I was gonna say our great hip hop prophet Kendrick Lamar says we gonna be all right. Like, we gonna be all right over here. But Molly, bum, 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 bum. But we together though. We working out. We working on how to pool our resources collectively so that we can all be all right.
Amen. Until next time.
Till next time. Bye.
Bye.